name is Mary Ellen, and I would like to welcome you to our virtual biodiversity and climate change presentation. Before we get started, I would just like to say that the Toronto Zoo acknowledges that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that the Toronto Zoo is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. For our broadcast today, we are going to be going all over the zoo, learning about different animals and how climate change is affecting them. Now, as we go throughout the day, you're going to be hearing from our climate action, learning, and leadership interns, and they're going to be giving you some conservation-themed riddles. Now, if you think you know the answer to the riddle, head over to the TZ Call Project Instagram page. You're going to see a few different posts with the riddles there. If you answer the riddle correctly in the comments, you're going to be entered in a draw to win one of two free virtual programs. So keep your eyes peeled for those riddles coming out and listen closely to call staff Robert and Greg, because they're going to be dropping some hints maybe for the riddle answers. And with that, let's head out to our first intern, Justin.
Justin, and I'm a call intern at the Toronto Zoo, and I'll be talking about biodiversity. So what is biodiversity? Bio essentially means life, and diversity is the variety. So biodiversity is the life and variety on Earth, and think of the Earth as a machine and biodiversity as the engine that drives that machine. And the more diverse the ecosystems are and habitats are, the more the Earth will thrive. And this is why it is important to take care of the forests as well as the older forests, because they help to absorb more carbon than the younger forests. This helps habitats to thrive, and thriving habitats show that they can absorb and store carbon, as well as reduce the effects of storms, erosion, flooding, and more natural disasters as well. This helps to keep forests and wetlands intact. So some ways you can do this is by supporting organizations like the Toronto Zoo and by reading about the different ways you can help. And now here's my riddle. Although my numbers are getting low, I've still got a lot to show. Helping me is good for all, because soon you won't hear my call.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Toronto Zoo. My name is Greg. Thank you, Justin, for that excellent tip on how important biodiversity is in the fight against climate change. Today I'm here in the Wildlife Health Gallery at the zoo, and I'm here with a special guest. I'm here today with Lisa, who is a wetland conservation technician with our Adopt a Pond program. Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
I see we have another special guest with us today. Can you tell us who this is and what kind of turtle he is?
Yeah, so this is Captain Sunshine. He's an adult male Blandings turtle. He's about 50 to 60 years old. As a Blandings turtle, he's one of 8 Ontario species, so he's local to Ontario. Blandings turtles are known to have a bright yellow chin and throat. He might be a bit shy, but when he sticks his head out, you might be able to see it. They also have a high domed shell that can sometimes have flecks of yellow on top. And Blandings turtles, so they're in Ontario, like I said, but they can also be found in Quebec, Nova Scotia, and into the States. So Captain Sunshine actually, before coming to the Toronto Zoo, was from the Detroit Zoo. So he was in the States before, but in 2011, he came to the Toronto Zoo. And so he's celebrating his 10th year anniversary here at the zoo. And we feed Captain Sunshine worms and fish and lettuce because turtles are omnivores, so they eat both meat and vegetation. And unfortunately, Captain Sunshine, he is a Blandings turtle, and Blandings turtles are listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List. So that's the global list on the health of biodiversity in the world. So unfortunately, they are listed as endangered.
Okay, so this is an endangered species. Can you tell us some of the threats, some of the reasons why Blandings turtles are endangered?
Yeah, so some of the threats, one of them is habitat loss. So we're developing on their wetlands, on their homes. Also, roads are being built right through their homes in their wetlands. This is where Blanding's turtles would often live. They need both water and land to survive. So this can break apart their wetland, and they have to cross the roads in order to get to the other side. So this would be like if you had a road go right through your house and you had to cross the road to get to your bedroom. Same with the Blanding's turtles. This puts them at risk at being hit by cars, which is also a big reason why they're listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List. Also things like poaching and the illegal pet trade. Blanding's turtles, unfortunately, are wanted in the black market, being sold for pets illegally. It is illegal to have a Blanding's turtle as a pet, as it is endangered. You can't keep them. We want to keep them in the wild. We want their population to survive since they're not doing too well. And also things like predators. So turtles have a lot of predators, as things like foxes, skunks, raccoons. They eat the turtle eggs and their hatchlings, so they're babies. So especially in urban areas, this is a big problem for turtles.
So myself and some of the call team members, we were fortunate enough to be able to go into the field with your team and see what you do in the field work. One of the things you talked about is head starting turtles. Can you tell us what head starting is and why it's so important for the conservation of Blanding's turtles?
Yeah, so head starting, so to start, the Adopt-A-Pond team here at the zoo, so we monitor reptiles and amphibians in the Rouge National Urban Park, which is near the zoo. And the head starting program, its goal is to bring back the population of Blanding's turtles in the Rouge National Urban Park. So years ago, the numbers were very low to only a few, and the head starting program was started to bring those numbers back up. So that involves taking eggs from a stable population source, incubating them at the zoo, and then letting them be raised at the zoo. They're fed a good diet, they're looked after until 2 years, and that's when we release them back into the wild and the Rouge National Urban Park. And actually, they're about the size of a 4 to 5 year old wild turtle, so they're quite a bit bigger than they would be at 2 years old in the wild. So this kind of gives them a head start at life. So they're at a better size to deal with predators. Like I mentioned, there's lots of predators in the Rouge as it's an urban park. So this kind of lets them hopefully survive, not be eaten by predators, and yeah, just avoid them. How we track them. So what we do is we need to monitor how they're doing. We need to know whether they're surviving, where they're going. So how we do this is we put transmitters on their shell, little transmitters, and we use radio telemetry, which uses an antenna and a receiver. It can pick up a radio signal that the transmitter is emitting, and we can listen for beeps, which tells us how close the turtle is. And this is kind of what we do in the field as Adopt-A-Pond, is we look for these turtles, see how they're doing, and the goal is to have them reach maturity, which is around 20 years old, which is when they'd be able to start reproducing and contributing to the population. And we even are tracking some turtles from 2013 when the head starting program started. So some of them are doing well and they're still surviving, which is great.
That's awesome. Such a great program, and I mean, so important to conserve biodiversity locally, not just globally. So when we're talking about our presentation today, we're looking at the links between biodiversity and climate change. Does climate change impact Blanding's turtles at all?
Yes, unfortunately, it does have a big impact. Blanding's turtles are climate sensitive. So turtles are ectothermic, so they're cold-blooded. So the climate and the environment, outdoor conditions really do affect a turtle and their body temperature, because they can't regulate their body temperature like we could. If it's too hot, our bodies will sweat to cool us off, but turtles can't do this. So high temperatures, they don't tolerate. And also these climate change of high temperatures, it can cause droughts and low precipitation, which causes some of their habitats. So like they live in wetlands, the ponds may dry up, and when they were once permanent, they may be semi-permanent or not even exist during the summer, completely dried up. So this causes turtles to lose their habitat, and even could cause them to cross roads to find more suitable habitat, which then could lead to more road mortality, unfortunately. So another thing is actually their eggs are temperature dependent, so it determines the sex of the turtles. So if it's colder temperatures while the eggs are incubating, that will cause more males. And if it's warmer temperatures while the eggs are incubating, that will cause more females, which could affect, with climate change, this could affect the balance and the ratio of females to males and affect reproduction and contributing to the population.
Wow, so it's so important for us to understand the impacts of climate change and how it will impact biodiversity. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Captain Sunshine, you did a great job here today. I'm sure everybody watching at home or at school wants to know, what can they do? Is there something that the people watching today can do to get involved?
Yeah, so actually, if you do see turtles on the roads, you can help them cross the roads. If it's safe to do so, definitely take them in the direction that they're facing. That way they get to where they want to go. You can also use our Adopt-A-Pond app. So Adopt-A-Pond has an app which you can record your sightings of turtles, also frogs as well. You can find that on your Google Play or your App Store. And this information will help us collect data on where turtles are found, what species are found, and give us a better idea of how to protect them. You can also find more information on our Facebook page, on our website, and learn more about why turtles are listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Captain Sunshine. All right, everyone, I'm going to send you over to Julia, another one of our call interns, with a climate tip and a riddle.
Hi, my name is Julia and I'm a call intern here at the Toronto Zoo. I'm from Brazil, which is the home of the largest rainforest in the world. Did you know that a tropical rainforest is the home for 30 million species of plants and animals? Trees are also important, not because they provide home for the animals, but also they pull carbon dioxide from the air and release oxygen, which is the gas that we breathe. Also, trees, they help in the water cycle, which helps cooling down the temperature of the earth. Without the trees, animals not only will lose their home, but they will also have no shelter, no food available, and no breeding habitat. Remember I said that the trees pull the carbon dioxide from the air? When a tree is burned down, all of this carbon dioxide is sent back into the air, which contributes to global warming. To help deforestation, you should try to go paperless, and when that's not possible, buy recycled products. Now, that's my riddle. A place for me to call my own. A plant, a tree, a little dome. A home that is unique to me. Come on inside, won't you see?
All right, call intern Julia coming in with the cool tips on how we can reduce our carbon footprint, as well as telling what her riddle was. So again, if you know the answer to her riddle, go to our Instagram page at TZ Call Project. You'll find Julia's post. Be sure to comment your answer down below, and then hopefully you'll get a chance to enter into the giveaway that we have for you. Now, if you don't know the answer, that's okay, because the next segment, I'll be dropping clues as to what that might be. So be sure to keep your ears open, and hopefully you'll get to see what that might be. But to kick us off, my name is Robert, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Call Project here at your Toronto Zoo. And I'm so excited today that I get to talk to you about climate change. Now, climate change has brought forth so many different changes to our world, especially when it comes to weather patterning, as well as surges in storm-like weather. Growing up here in Toronto, I can definitely say the weather has been very different since I was a kid. Winters have been not as cold, and the summers have been a lot hotter here, so we definitely experience the changes due to climate change. However, animals do have the ability to adapt to these changes. It's called adaptations. The problem is, adaptations take over several generations to happen, and that means several hundreds of years. The changes that are happening right now due to climate change, especially with the weather, it's happening at such an accelerated pace that they just can't keep up with it. And what's happening is that a lot of these animals are losing their habitat, which is really unfortunate and has definitely affected those wild populations. There's so many animals that we can talk about when it comes to this, but today we're going to be focusing on the greater one-horn rhino. So here at the Toronto Zoo, we do have the greater one-horn rhinos here with us. We have 3 of them. We have Vishnu, he is our male, he is 18 years old. But it looks like today we got Asha over here, as well as Kieran. Asha is 17 years old, right to the right. And then Kieran is to our left right now. He's 3 years old. So he's actually Asha's son. Now, in the wild, rhinos are solitary animals. However, during mating season and during breeding season, they'll come together, as well as when they're raising their young to the ages of 2 to 3 years old. Now, these are the second largest species of rhino, second to the southern white-horned rhino, and their name comes from greater one-horned rhinos because of that one horn that they have in the front over there, which is quite unique. Now, the greater one-horned rhinos are mega herbivores, so other herbivores do rely on them in their environment, and they play an extremely vital role when it comes to browsing and shaping the landscape that they live in. It helps open up a lot of niches for other organisms as well. Now, in the wild, where you'll find these rhinos is along the northeast border of India, as well as South Nepal as well, kind of within that area. And they live in very specific pockets in those areas. They are habitat specialists too. But again, looking at these rhinos, one of the most glaring things that you can see is their size. So initially, I was kind of standing right over here. The rhinos, they weigh around 4,000 to 6,000 pounds. So give or take what that kind of looks like. Those are just numbers to you. It's around probably, let's say, I would say 10 cars put together or 100 of me. So you can imagine how heavy they must be as well. Not only that though, the one thing that I kind of find too is if you look at their ears, they have a great sense of hearing. It's bi-directional hearing, so they can pivot. You can kind of see Kieran over here pivoting his ears back and forth to see where the keepers are, as well as they have a great sense of smell too. The only thing that they're lacking of is their sense of sight. It's not that great, so that's why they rely on hearing and smelling as well when it comes to looking for food, which is really important for them. Not only that though, when I look at a greater one-horned rhino, another striking feature is that skin of theirs. It looks like they're sporting some armor right now. That skin is quite thick, and it actually offers a lot of protection as well. And if you can see, especially near the neck area, there tends to be a lot of extra folds, which is really important because that's where their vital organs are. So if there are any attacks from predators or either from other rhinos as well, when it comes to territoriality, that helps offer a protection too. But don't let that fool you because that skin of theirs is actually quite sensitive. So what they'll do is they actually will wallow in mud. So here at the Toronto Zoo, there is a wallow in their exhibit, just right down there. And what that does is that once they lather some mud on themselves, it offers an extra layer of protection, whether it's against the sun as well as against mosquito bites as well, because their skin is quite sensitive. Now, they were demonstrating it before, but because these guys are browsers, and if we get a little bit closer, you'll kind of see they have a prehensile lip. So that lip allows them to grasp branches, and you can kind of see them demonstrating that right now. Ashley doing a great job doing that, manipulating that environment in order to get the browse, the shrubbery, and the foliage that they need in their diet. In the zoo, they actually have free choice in hay, so they can eat as much or as little hay as they like. They also get browse as well, but also sometimes they'll get a couple of fruits as an extra treat. We don't give too many fruits just because it is quite high in sugar content, but in the wild, they might find a fruit here and there as well. And lastly, we can't talk about a rhino without talking about that beautiful horn of theirs that they have at the front. So the horn usually grows on average around 40 to 60 centimeters in length. And we often think that people use, the greater one-horned rhinos use their horns for defense. They actually use their horns not so much for defense, but actually they use their incisors that they have in their mouth to defense, especially when it comes to fighting other rhinos. That they use those incisors to gouge. But that horn really helps them manipulate their environment, which is quite important. Now, the horn is an important part of the rhino story. Historically, what has happened in the past is that they were poached for their horn because people believe that the horn had medicinal value to it. So it could cure illnesses, diseases. However, we know that to not be true, as their horn is just made out of keratin. So the same thing as our fingernails and our hair is made out of. There is no value to that at all. But it's quite unfortunate because at one point in their history, they were only around 200 individuals left out there. That's it, 200. That's not that many at all. But what had happened is that wildlife conservation authorities took notice and they took action. So rules and regulations became into place, and they were able to bring up that population to today, which stands around 3,700 to 3,800 individuals. So that is a huge increase, and it's one of the great success stories for the greater one-horned rhino. Now, that's great that the species has recovered, and it's really amazing story to hear. But again, there are new threats that are posing them right now, and a lot of that has to do with climate change and habitat loss. So like I said, these rhinos, they are specialists in terms of their habitat and where they like to live. So they live in these riverine areas, along the floodplains, along the Himalayan foothills. So you're looking at forested areas, maybe some swampy areas as well. And these areas, unfortunately, their habitats are being lost due to the seasonality, the weathering that we were talking about. So now monsoon season is a lot longer, so you're looking at a lot more precipitation, And the drought season is also quite long as well, so a high dry season. And how this affects them is that you can imagine a lot of precipitation induces a lot of flooding in that area. And while these guys are semi-aquatic, they're only semi-aquatic. So if the floods get too high, they unfortunately will not be able to survive. There have been reports of rhinos unfortunately dying due to flooding in their natural habitats. Not only that, though, when it comes to erosion, you have precipitation coming down from the mountains, bringing in that extra topsoil to where their vegetation lives, and that really affects what goes on there as well. The natural vegetation that they will usually eat. It's not being as fertile anymore, and therefore it's not sustaining those populations there. So an increase in precipitation, but also an increase in the temperature too. So you're looking at extended drought. And I mentioned how important it was for these rhinos to be able to go in those walls to make sure that they have that extra protection of mud on their skin. And without that, this leaves them more susceptible to diseases and illnesses too. And when it comes to the rhinos too, you're looking at changes in their environment, in that habitat, which provides an opportunity for invasive species to come in. And we're talking about the vegetation or other species as well that sort of take what they would normally eat. So let's say their main foliage that they would like to browse on is no longer available. This affects the rhinos that are there, unfortunately, in the wild. So all these changes due to climate change has resulted in the habitat loss for the greater one-horned rhinos. So what can we do to help? Well, it kind of makes sense, right? If we're losing habitats, we want to restore these habitats. So there's a lot of great initiatives that are put into place, a lot of partners that partnered up, especially in the national parks within the India and Nepal region. There's the Chitwan National Park as well as the Kaziranga National Park. And these two national parks house the largest populations of wild greater one-horned rhinos that are left in here. And what they're looking to do is to create more connectivity between these two landscapes so that the existing populations that are out there, that they'll start breeding and hopefully expand their population a little bit more. But not only that as well, we're looking at hopefully having more corridors so that there is more access between them. Now, hopefully today you guys got the chance to see and learn a thing or two about the greater one-horned rhinos. It's a super unique experience, and look at that. Just browsing away, living their best life over here, which is amazing. Now, we're gonna head on over to Neela over at the African rainforest for our next riddle.
My name is Neela, and I'm a call intern here at the Toronto Zoo, and today I'm going to be talking about plastic pollution and ways we can help reduce it. So what are plastics made of? They come from fossil fuels and they emit greenhouse gases from the second that they're produced. They're made from raw materials like oil, gas, and plants, which end up into fossil fuels. Apart from the fossil fuels that emit greenhouse gases, the plastic left behind does the most damage. The plastic that ends up in the ocean turns into microplastic, which the fish end up eating, and then the other animals end up eating them, and it hurts the entire ecosystem. So what are some ways that we can help reduce our plastic consumption? We can use reusable water bottles and metal straws and anything else we can think of. And here's a riddle. We have this effect on those around. It alters the air, the water, the ground. Temperatures are changing way too fast. Working together, we can make a change that lasts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neela, for that tip on how we can reduce plastic consumption and why it's so important. And thank you for your riddle. Make sure you listen during this segment for the answer to Neela's riddle. All right, so we are here at the habitat of one of my favorite animals here at the Toronto Zoo, the polar bear. Very difficult for us to have a conversation about climate change without including this iconic Canadian animal. So we are here today with Juno, who is one of our younger female polar bears. She's 5 years of age. Now, Robert left us with a very tough act to follow because polar bears, they kind of do what they want. The keepers were kind enough to spread a bunch of food for us right by the window, but Juno, she tore through that pretty quick, and now she's just sort of chilling out over on the side there. But at any rate, I want to share with you some information about polar bears today. So when we talk about polar bears, we're talking about them as an iconic Canadian species, and the reason for this is because they are so impacted by climate change in Canada's Arctic. We've been feeling the effects of climate change in Canada for quite a while now, and nowhere more so than up in Canada's north. Here comes Juno now. So as you can see, she's a big bear. So when we talk about polar bears and being iconic in Canada, it's because 2/3 of the world's polar bears are found in our country. And so another interesting fact that a lot of people don't know or understand is we actually have polar bears in the province of Ontario. After this presentation today, if you go and look on a map of Ontario, you'll see Hudson's Bay jutting down into the north of our province. During the summer months, polar bears will retreat from the ice onto land in Ontario, spend the summer months there, and once the ice comes back in the winter, then the polar bears will retreat back out onto the ice to hunt seals in Hudson's Bay. So one of the first things you probably noticed about Juno as she was walking along is how massive she is. So when we talk about male polar bears, we're looking at an animal that's between 400 to 600 kilograms in size and between 2.5 and 3.5 meters in length. We do have some males behind us, and if they pop their head up later, we'll show them to you. Juno's a little on the smaller side as a female. But what I find is unless you're right next to these animals, if they're a little farther away in the habitat, sometimes it's really hard to grasp how big these animals actually are. And so that's why I brought this cast of a polar bear skull today, just to give you a sense of how massive these guys are. Check out those massive canines. So a very big, robust, long nose for an excellent sense of smell. So the other thing that we'll notice about polar bears, if you're familiar with some of the other bear species we have here in Ontario, like black bears, the first thing you'll notice about this polar bear is that white fur. Now, obviously, that white fur, very beneficial as a form of camouflage up north in their snowy environment. But an interesting note about their fur, although it appears white to us, it's actually hollow. And so it's clear and hollow. So when the sunlight hits it, the sunlight actually travels down to the skin of a bear. Now, if you were ever to shave a polar bear, which I wouldn't recommend, they actually have black skin underneath. And so that black skin absorbs that sunlight and helps for the bear to retain heat. And not only is the hair clear, it's also a dense undercoat underneath to help keep them warm in the winter time and while they're moving through water. So if you were to look at the cross section of a polar bear, underneath that big thick fur, you would have a nice, beautiful layer of fat. And this fat is crucial to the health of a polar bear. Polar bears need to survive throughout the year on the fat that they collect, and they get that by eating nice, blubbery, ringed seals. And so the fat keeps them warm, provides them energy, and it also has the benefit of allowing them to be more buoyant in the water. So polar bears are excellent swimmers, but they're very large animals. Having that extra layer of fat provides an extra level of buoyancy that will help them to move through the water effectively. So when a polar bear is up north, they're spending a lot of time on their feet traveling around. And their feet are perfectly adapted for life up north. So polar bears have large paws, and on the end of those paws, they have these massive claws. And these claws allow them to grip into the ice as they're traveling across the ice. They also have pads on their feet with papier on their feet, and that helps them to grab into the ice and snow as they're traveling. Now, when they're not walking across the ice at a slow amble so that they don't actually overheat, they can also be spending a lot of time swimming in the water. And then they turn those big front paws into big paddles to help them move effectively through the water. So why are they traveling such great distances up north? What are polar bears doing while they're swimming and walking across the ice? Well, ultimately, they're looking for food. So polar bears, as we said already, are so reliant on sea ice, and that's because they're hunting ringed seals. So they're using these giant paws to help them catch their dinner. And so ringed seals are seals that will pop up at breathing holes in fully iced areas. So polar bears walk across the ice using their wonderful sense of smell to find these breathing holes. And then what the polar bear will do is it will hunker down next to that hole for up to a period of hours, waiting to ambush a seal that pops up to breathe. And when that seal pops up, the polar bear is going to grab it with that claw, haul it out on the ice, and then kill it with those huge canines we showed you before. Another way that they're effective at hunting also relies on the sea ice, but they'll hunt around the edge. So a polar bear might pop out of the water and try and catch some basking seals on the edge of the ice and then be able to kill them that way. So when we talk about these guys and the sea ice and how important it is, it has to do with the fact that we're looking for a way for them to effectively hunt seals. So what happens with the seasonality up north is that, as we said before, the sea ice retreats during the summer months and polar bears are forced to live on land. And during this time on land, it's sort of a nutritional stress for them because they're no longer able to hunt seals. They need to kill about 43 seals a year to effectively get enough fat to survive throughout the whole year. And so in the summer months, as you can see on the ground here, there's some vegetation and things. Polar bears don't just eat meat. They will eat dead carrion, dead animals they find, maybe some eggs, things of that nature, vegetation through the summer. And we sort of mimic that diet for them here at the zoo, and their weight will fluctuate accordingly. But the problem we have is climate change. So with climate change, what happens is as the Arctic warms, the sea ice is going to retreat earlier, and it's going to be later coming in. As we said, these polar bears need 43 seals a year to survive. And if climate change is reducing the amount of time sea ice is available for the polar bears to hunt, it's effectively reducing the amount of time polar bears have to get their food for the year and have that thick layer of fat that allows them to survive. So without that fat, these animals are going to be nutritionally stressed. That's going to ultimately impact their reproduction and ultimately the survival of the species. So the famous polar bear biologist has said that polar bears are relying on sea ice ecosystems. And if we don't have a sea ice ecosystem, due to climate change, ultimately, we will not have polar bears. So it's so important for all of us to figure out ways that we can reduce our climate impact and try to reduce and reverse the effects of climate change that we're already seeing so that we can indeed save this iconic Canadian species from climate change. Thank you so much for paying attention today. I hope you enjoyed our time here with Juno. I am going to send you back to Mary Ellen with a few closing words.
Wow, thanks so much, Greg. That was absolutely amazing. I hope everyone watching enjoyed seeing some of our animals, learning about how they're endangered, their habitats, and how climate change is affecting them. Don't forget, if you think you know the riddle answers from the 3 different riddles we heard, head over to the TZ Call Project Instagram, find the corresponding post, and write your answer below. If you're correct, you'll be entered into our draw. And we'll be announcing the winner of our 2 virtual programs, or our 2 winners, tomorrow on the next Facebook Live for the Toronto Zoo. So tune in on the Toronto Zoo Facebook at 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon to find out if you won. And if you enjoyed the broadcast today and want to see more of the Toronto Virtual Zoo, head over to our website under Zoo to You. That way you can check out all of our program offerings. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!